How do you know when an avoidant is actually done versus just pulling away again? They've disappeared before and come back. The silence has a different quality. The distance seems more permanent. Something shifted that you can't quite name. Something in their behavior fundamentally changed. Not the usual withdrawal you've seen before, but something else entirely. They're reorganizing their life in ways that leave no space for you. The connection that used to bounce back now feels permanently severed. What I'm showing you next will clarify exactly where you stand and what these behavioral shifts actually mean. Figuring out if an avoidant is temporarily pulling back or actually finished with you comes down to watching specific behavior patterns, not trusting your gut or interpreting your anxious thoughts. The tricky part is that both situations look similar at first. Both start with them creating distance and becoming less available. Both involve them going quiet and seeming disconnected. But what's driving each scenario is completely different, and those differences show up in 4 clear ways once you know what to watch for. Temporary pullback happens when getting close triggers their defense system, but they still want the relationship. Their brain and body perceive danger from intimacy and automatically create space to feel safe again. They're not deciding to leave on purpose. They're managing their discomfort with being vulnerable without even realizing it. The relationship still matters to them. They still see possibilities for the future. Their system just needs breathing room before they can handle closeness again. This follows a pattern they've probably repeated in past relationships and earlier stages of this one. Being actually done happens when they've decided, either consciously or without fully realizing it, that the relationship doesn't work for them anymore. This isn't a defensive reaction to feeling overwhelmed temporarily. It's a real shift in how they see the relationship's future. Something crossed a line. Maybe they figured out their needs aren't getting met. Maybe they decided you're too incompatible. Maybe someone else caught their attention who seems like a better fit. Maybe the relationship demanded more emotional energy than they're willing to give. Whatever pushed them over the edge, they moved from managing discomfort to ending their investment completely. The way they communicate shows the first major difference between pulling back temporarily and being done for good. When they're just pulling back, avoidants keep some level of contact going. They take longer to reply, but they do reply eventually. Their messages stay short and don't go deep. But they don't vanish completely. They might send random updates about their life, or ask simple questions about yours. There's a thin thread of connection that stays alive. They're creating space, but not cutting you off entirely. This minimal contact does something specific for them. It lets them keep their independence and breathing room while leaving the relationship door open. The messages might feel colder than they used to be, but underneath there's still some level of interest, even if it's buried under all their defenses. You can feel that they're managing distance, not planning an exit. When they're actually done, communication doesn't just drop off. The entire quality and purpose behind it changes. Responses become purely about logistics, or they stop happening at all. They might answer direct questions with one word that kills the conversation instead of continuing it. Or they just stop responding, period, even to important practical stuff that would normally get their attention. The energy behind their words shifts from creating distance to getting out. There's zero effort to keep even the smallest connection alive. Messages feel like they're checking a box, not because they care. That thread that normally stays intact when they pull back gets completely cut. Even when they do respond, there's a flatness to it that wasn't there during other withdrawal phases. It's not that they're being cold or trying to punish you. It's that real interest has completely dried up. They're going through motions with nothing genuine behind them. You can feel the difference between someone creating space within the relationship versus someone who's already left mentally. How they talk about the future gives you the second clear sign of what's really happening. Avoidants who are just pulling back keep future talk vague, but still there. They say things like, "When things settle down," or "After I get through this busy stretch," or "We'll deal with it later." These statements buy them time and keep things unclear, but they still suggest a future together exists somehow. They're not making solid plans, but they're not completely ruling out future connection either. This vagueness does something for them. It gives them space, while avoiding the finality of ending things. The future stays fuzzy and undefined, which lets them stay in the relationship without committing to deeper closeness. When you bring up plans weeks or months away, they might be wishy-washy about it, but they don't completely shut the conversation down. There's still room for possibility, even if that room feels frustratingly vague and uncertain. They haven't made up their mind to leave, so they keep one foot in by leaving the future open-ended. When they're done, future references either completely disappear or become obviously limited to not include you. They stop mentioning anything that assumes you'll be in their future. Conversations stay locked in what's happening now or what already happened. If you push them about future plans, they get uncomfortable, switch topics, or give answers that clearly don't have you in the picture. Sometimes they're straight up about not seeing a future together. Other times they just stop engaging in any conversation that requires thinking past today. The shift from vague future to no future at all is a massive indicator of their actual investment. They start talking about their own plans, goals, or upcoming stuff without any sign you're part of that picture. Where they used to say, "We should," or "Maybe we could," they now say, "I'm planning to," or "I've decided to." The plural completely vanishes from how they talk. This language shift often happens before any actual breakup conversation, showing that in their head, the relationship already ended, even if they haven't said those words yet. They're building a mental picture of their life that has no room for you in it. How they handle your presence in their life shows the third big difference. When they're pulling back, temporarily, avoidants create physical and emotional distance, but don't actively erase you from their world. They might not make plans, but they don't go out of their way to avoid you either. They might not share much about what they're doing, but they don't hide their location or activities. Their social media stays pretty much the same. They might post less or interact less with your stuff, but they don't block you, unfollow you, or delete relationship evidence. They're managing distance, not erasing the connection. Their daily routine might naturally create separation, but they're not deliberately making sure you never run into each other. If you happen to be in the same place, they're awkward, but not hostile. They're uncomfortable with closeness, but not actively eliminating your existence from their space. You still exist in their world, just at a distance they can handle. When they're done, there's often a systematic removal of you from their life. They might unfollow or block you on social media. They delete photos or anything that references the relationship from their profiles. They stop showing up at places they know you'll be. They create obvious separation between their life and yours in ways they never did during previous withdrawal phases. This isn't just emotional distancing. It's actively taking apart the relationship infrastructure. They're not keeping the option to come back open. They're closing that door and removing the handles so it can't be opened again. Mutual friends might mention that they asked people not to bring you up, or that they change the subject when your name comes up. They're not just creating space within the relationship. They're reorganizing their entire life to function as if the relationship never existed. This erasure goes beyond just avoiding contact. It's a complete restructuring of their world that leaves absolutely no room for you to fit back into it. They're not managing their discomfort with intimacy. They're building a new reality where you're simply not part of the equation. The fourth and biggest difference shows up in how they react when you try to connect or work through problems. Avoidants in pullback mode usually resist deep conversations and dodge conflict, but they don't completely shut down the possibility of working through stuff. They say things like, "Not right now," or "I need more time," or "Can we talk about this later?" These responses are frustrating and create uncertainty, but they leave the door slightly cracked open. They're avoiding the discomfort of confrontation and emotional intensity, but they're not refusing to ever deal with it. If you gently persist over time, they might eventually participate in difficult conversations, even if they do it reluctantly. Their resistance is about managing how their nervous system responds to vulnerability, not about ending the relationship. They want the problem to disappear, but they don't necessarily want you to disappear. There's still care underneath the avoidance, even if accessing it feels nearly impossible. They're protecting themselves from discomfort, not from you specifically. When they're done, there's a total shutdown around any attempt to address relationship problems or find resolution. They either refuse to engage at all, get defensive in ways that feel different from their normal avoidant defensiveness, or agree to conversations they have zero intention of actually having. If you try to discuss where the relationship stands or what's wrong, they might give you complete silence, respond with hostility, or provide surface-level acknowledgments that go nowhere. The difference from temporary pullback is obvious once you know what to look for. During pullback, their resistance comes from discomfort with emotional intensity. But there's still underlying care about the relationship. When they're done, the resistance comes from having already mentally and emotionally checked out. They're not avoiding the conversation because it's uncomfortable. They're avoiding it because they already made their decision and see no point in discussing it. Any attempt to work through issues hits a brick wall that wasn't there during previous withdrawal cycles. They might even become cold or cruel in ways they never were before, not because they're trying to hurt you, but because they've emotionally detached to the point where your feelings don't register as their problem anymore. The empathy that used to be there, even when buried under defenses, has completely evaporated. These differences aren't always immediately obvious, because how things start looks the same. Silence is silence. Distance is distance. But watching how these patterns develop over time shows you whether you're dealing with temporary pullback or permanent exit. Pullback has a rhythm to it. There's withdrawal, then regulation, then eventual movement back toward connection, even if that movement is slow and hesitant. Being done has no rhythm because there's no cycle. It's a straight line away from the relationship with no turning back. The person who pulls back temporarily is trying to find equilibrium within the relationship. The person who's done is trying to find equilibrium without the relationship. Understanding this difference matters enormously for how you respond. If someone is pulling back temporarily, there's a specific approach that involves staying stable yourself, keeping minimal strategic contact, and eventually having a conversation about the pattern. This works because they're still invested in the relationship, and their withdrawal is a defense mechanism, not an exit plan. But if someone is actually done, that same approach accomplishes nothing except dragging out your pain. Staying stable is still important for your own mental health, but strategic contact and pattern conversations won't bring back someone who's genuinely finished. They made a decision, either consciously or unconsciously, that this relationship isn't what they want or need. No amount of perfect behavior on your part changes that. The hard part is that people often misread pullback as being done because the anxiety of their silence feels unbearable. Every withdrawal feels like abandonment when you're on the receiving end. The fear that this time is different, that they're not coming back, that it's finally over. This fear is intense and constant. But acting from that fear by chasing them, demanding answers, or assuming the worst can actually push someone who's just pulling back into being done for real. The pursuit confirms what their nervous system fears most, that closeness means losing independence. It can transform what was temporary withdrawal into permanent exit. Your anxiety-driven reactions can become the thing that ends what might have survived if handled differently. On the flip side, people sometimes misread being done as just another pullback cycle, because accepting the end hurts too much. Hope is powerful and persistent. Your brain wants to believe that if you just give them enough space, if you just wait long enough, if you just prove you're not needy, they'll come back like they always have before. But hope without evidence becomes denial. Staying invested in someone who's genuinely done means sacrificing your own well-being and time for a relationship that no longer exists except in your imagination. The signs are sitting right in front of you if you're willing to see them clearly instead of through the filter of what you desperately want to be true. Reading these signs accurately requires emotional distance that's nearly impossible to achieve when you're in the middle of the situation. Everything feels urgent and loaded with meaning. Every text or lack of text seems like a definitive answer about the relationship's future. But accurate reading requires stepping back and looking at the overall pattern instead of individual interactions. One unreturned text doesn't mean they're done. One vague future reference doesn't mean they're staying. It's the accumulation of behaviors across all four areas: communication quality, future talk, presence in their life, and response to connection attempts that reveals the truth. You need to see the forest, not obsess over individual trees. Looking at these patterns honestly might reveal an uncomfortable reality. Maybe they are done. Maybe this withdrawal is different from the others. Maybe the relationship ended even though there was no official conversation or clean break. Accepting this reality, when it's actually true, lets you stop waiting and start moving forward. The limbo of not knowing is often more painful than the clarity of knowing, even when that clarity confirms your worst fears. Continuing to invest emotional energy in analyzing whether they might come back keeps you stuck in a loop that prevents healing and growth. You can't move forward while you're still waiting for someone to come back. On the other hand, accurately identifying that someone is just pulling back rather than done lets you respond strategically instead of reactively. You can stay stable without anxiously chasing them. You can give them space without disappearing completely. You can prepare for the eventual conversation about patterns. You can make informed decisions about whether this relationship is worth dealing with, given their attachment style and your own needs. Clarity about what's actually happening, whether they're temporarily withdrawn or permanently done, empowers you to act in your own best interest, instead of just reacting to anxiety and uncertainty. The question isn't whether avoidant people have the right to end relationships or need space. Obviously, they do. Everyone has the right to leave relationships that don't work for them. Everyone needs space sometimes to process and calm down. The question is whether you're going to spend your time and energy on someone who's already gone or someone who's temporarily withdrawn but still invested. That difference determines everything about how you move forward. Spending months waiting for someone who's done means months of your life on hold for nothing. Giving up too early on someone who's just pulling back means potentially losing a relationship that could have worked with better understanding and tools. Making this assessment requires brutal honesty with yourself about what you're actually seeing versus what you're hoping to see. It requires looking at their behavior patterns, not their occasional words or your interpretation of their intentions. It requires accepting that sometimes people don't give you the closure of a clear ending. They just fade away and expect you to figure it out on your own. It requires recognizing when you're holding on to breadcrumbs and calling it a meal. The signs are there. The difference between pullback and being done shows up clearly in communication patterns, future references, presence in their life, and response to connection attempts. The question is whether you're willing to see what's actually there instead of what you wish was there. If you're trying to figure out whether an avoidant is done with you, look at these 4 patterns, how their communication changed in quality, not just quantity, whether future talk includes you or disappeared completely. If they're actively removing your presence from their life, how they respond when you try to address problems. These patterns together tell you what's really happening. Leave a comment sharing which sign hit hardest for your situation. If this helped you see the difference between temporary withdrawal and permanent exit, hit the like button and subscribe for more content on navigating attachment patterns. Thanks for watching.